Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this important dialogue on sustainable finance in Vietnam. And I have good news for you. We have an exceptional lineup of speakers today, representing both international expertise and local market knowledge. And I'm pleased to introduce our Chairman and CEO, Mr. Nguyễn Quang Thuân, who will provide our opening remarks. Mr. Thuân has been instrumental in developing Vietnam's sustainable finance ecosystem and will set the stage for today's discussion. I leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Tung Anh. So, good morning, esteemed guests, speaker, or participants. Thank you all for being here today, and special thanks to Professor Tho from Ministry of Agriculture and Environment, and Mr. Dung from State Securities Commission for your invaluable contribution to our event today. So as we gather today, it's essential to recognize the momentum behind the green growth in Vietnam. This is a significant global trend that's expanding rapidly across the globe and in the region. Here in Vietnam, while we have begun to explore these avenues, our journey toward sustainable development has been somewhat slow, to be frankly. And since the COP26 summit in November 2021, Vietnam has made a firm commitment to achieving net zero emission. This commitment has spurred the implementation of numerous policy, ongoing plans aiming at fostering the green growth for Vietnam. Notably, we have seen recent advancement on the policy fronts, with the green finance being reinforced by the resolution 68 by the party, the ruling party of Vietnam, and resolution 198 by the National Assembly. On the market side, we are witnessing an increasing in ESG investment, impact investing, green credit, and green bonds. However, in terms of green bonds and green loans, we still see a limited transaction, indicating the need for further development. We are encouraged by the progression of the sustainable finance policy in Vietnam. The State Securities Commission has issued guideline, handbook, and disclosure for ESG investing. And we also see the State Bank of Vietnam has introduced environmental and social credit guidelines, including the Circular 17 on the environmental risk management. Furthermore, the Ministry of Finance and SSC are actively shaping the policy surrounding the green bonds, while the government, with the input from Ministry of Agriculture and Environment, MOF, and SSC, is working on the development of a comprehensive green taxonomy for Vietnam. As a credit rating agency in Vietnam, FinRatings recognize the critical role that sustainable capital play very important role for economic growth, supporting the Vietnamese enterprises. Our position as a green bond verification agency has provided with a unique insight to the importance of the market integrity, transparency in the green finance, ensuring we move away from the pitfall of greenwashing. We are very excited about our recent partnership with S&P Global, where they invested 44% in our FinRatings. S&P Global is a global leader, not only in the credit ratings, but in sustainable finance domain as well. Together with the expert, with the specialists from S&P Global Ratings, we would like to contribute in valuable knowledge, market sharing, and the case studies that we have Vietnamese enterprises in sustainable finance. Now, let's take a moment to outline the current contents for today's event. So we will spend about 2 hours and 30 minutes. Especially, we will spend more time on the discussion and sharing with our policymaker here, the expert in the domain, and after we hearing the presentation and sharing from specialists from S&P. And thank you all again for the present, and I look forward to a productive and insightful event. So without further ado, let's begin with welcoming our first speaker, Mr. Bertrand Zaboli. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and many thanks, Mr. Thuân, for the warm welcome. So let me share my screen. Yeah, so I have just a short presentation for you because Mr. Tuan told me you talk about whatever you want, but you don't overrun. So this is my commitment to you. It will last maximum 20 minutes. What I want to do today is share a few thoughts with you on why the sustainability picture is complex in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. What kind of transactions we have seen, both globally and across APAC, where there could be some opportunities in Vietnam, and why we are feeling good. We believe that the future is promising for the country. So first, this slide key message is that it's complicated. Here I've taken, the case of power because when thinking about sustainability, typically market participants think greenhouse gas emissions, and obviously power is a major contributor. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you see that between 2010 and 2025, while still adding some coal to its power generation portfolio, right? The country added 60% of renewables across hydro, solar, and wind. Yet, the right-hand side of the chart is showing you that the challenge is to address a growing power need. So since 2010, what we have seen in the country is that on average, the consumption of power has increased by 8%. It's quite significant. And what is a bit counterintuitive when you see all the renewable energy additions, actually the power produced out of coal has increased twice as fast, meaning that to face, its power needs in a thriving economy, the country has actually resorted a lot to carbon-intensive technologies. And if you're looking at Vietnam today, the power grid carbon intensity, it's about 600 grams per kilowatt hour produced. And this is the third highest in APAC behind the Philippines and Indonesia.
Yeah, you are not screen right now.
Sorry.
We are
Okay, so if we are zooming out a little bit to Southeast Asia, because the a very interesting sub-region with many common themes across the country. On the left-hand side, you are looking at the aggregated, emissions, GDP contribution, and employment across the main industries in the sub-region for the 6 largest nations. And what is interesting that you see that agriculture and nature, this is 30% of emissions,
Bertrand,
right?
can you
Yet,
get the slide?
Slide.
We can't see the slide.
Slideshow. We haven't seen the slide.
it has disappeared. It has disappeared. It's weird. Hang on. Is it back now?
no, we are not seeing it yet.
Now?
Oh, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, very, very sorry for that. So, I mean, you didn't see the previous slide?
Yes, unfortunately.
Okay, well, just getting back very, very quickly. So, showing on the one hand a lot of renewable energy capacity addition, yet the issue with renewable power is that it's intermittent and the country needs base load because it's growing a lot. And as a result, the electricity power grid remains quite carbon intensive. Very sorry for the technical hiccups. So what you're seeing here is the complexity, of sustainability. Let's take the example of agriculture and nature. So this is 30% of emissions. So this is quite significant. Yet it's 10% of GDP and about 30% of employment. So whatever the country does in agriculture may be socially sensitive because of employment, and yet the sector is not producing as much wealth as it is emitting carbon. So there are just so much resources that market participants in agriculture and nature can invest in decarbonization. And in addition, still talking about decarbonization, 80% of power across the sub-region remains, reliant on fossil fuels and energy-intensive industries. It's about a third of the economy because Southeast Asia is a manufacturing powerhouse, and manufacturing is typically quite energy intensive. And also talking about those social sensitivities, I know the focus of the seminar is green, but social is also important. You can also be mindful that energy intensive industries, so those industries with potentially problematic sustainability footprint, employ 150 million people in Southeast Asia. So again, those two slides are really meant to set the scene, to say there are opportunities, which I will discuss a bit later, yet it's a little bit complicated. So now let's talk about sustainable bond markets. So I want to focus my discussion on bonds because they are public information, meaning that they are public instruments, meaning that information is widely available, what is not the case for loans. So as you can see on the left-hand side, global bonds, global sustainable bond, it's about 1.1 trillion. APAC, 238 billion USD equivalent last year, so it's about 23% of the total. Commonalities is the dominance of green bonds. It's about 60% in the world. It's about 50% in APAC. What is interesting in APAC is that you have much more social bonds and some transition bonds, because we have seen in every single market a kind of logical sequence. It starts with green instruments because everyone is aware of those global imperatives in relation to climate change, for instance. So green is kind of very factual, very objective, reasonably easy to understand. Then you come the time for sustainability bonds. So it's kind of mix of green and a little bit of social as well. Then you see pure social instruments. Then comes the time of sustainability-linked instruments. So I mean, those instruments are general corporate purpose associated with some sustainability objectives. And the last and latest layer in the market are transition bonds. Interestingly, those instruments are concentrated in APAC, given the Japanese government's effort to promote those instruments. Let's now zoom a little bit on Vietnam. So why am I showing you the Vietnamese bonds outstanding and not sustainable bonds? It's because everything starts with a local currency market. And the market in Vietnam has been, fairly dynamic. I mean, since 2015, so in the last decade, it has tripled in size, from 40 billion US dollars to more than 140. Yet it remains comparatively small, compared to other nations. It accounts for 27% of GDP. To give you some comparison, in more developed economies, like Korea, Japan in the region, or the Western nations, this ratio is way above 100%. And the reason why I'm showing this line, which represents the percentage of sustainable bonds over total bonds outstanding globally, is to give you a sense of maybe the potential of the market. So this number has evolved between like 7%, 12% year after year. So if you extrapolate, you say on average it's about 10%, you have a market which is worth today in Vietnam 140 billion US dollars equivalent. So that suggests that were Vietnam to catch up, with other nations, then that we could see over time maybe 15 billion US dollars of sustainable instruments outstanding in the market. We're a bit far away from this amount because since 2021 we have seen 1.1 billion worth of issuance. Yet what is interesting that we have already seen innovations in this market. We've seen a blue bond, And as far as I know, we've seen only 2 blue bonds in the region, one for SEA Bank in Vietnam, one for TTB in Thailand. We have already seen one sustainability-linked instrument, while those, are not that dynamic so far in APAC. I mean, we have seen only 6 billion worth of issuance last year across APAC, and globally, the instrument has been losing momentum because the global issuance in 2024, they were about 35 billion. This is a third of issuance at their peak in 2021. So that remains. So again, the market sustainable bond in Vietnam are a bit small, yet they have shown a lot of dynamism. And actually, in 24, issuance were thrice as high as 23. So clear momentum, still early days, but we can see a lot of potential. What is great, because there is just a lot to do across the country. So I'm showing the aggregated carbon emissions of the country per sector. So as you can see, power is the big elephant in the room, so to speak. We've seen in the previous slides that coal dominates the power generation of Vietnam. It's more than 40% of the power generation. So that makes sense that power remains the largest emissions contributor. When it comes to structures, for use of proceeds, 90% of those instruments cover the decarbonizations of buildings, power, or transportation. And Vietnam has a vibrant real estate industry. Vietnam has an EV manufacturer champion, right? And when it comes to transportation as well, Vietnam has an aging rails system, for instance. So there are some opportunities. And when it comes to power, well, we've seen the picture is a bit contrasted. And today, the generation capacity of Vietnam is about 40% renewable compared to much closer to 30% 10 years ago. So there is momentum. But base load considerations means that the actual power produced remains quite carbon intensive. Sustainability-linked instruments, 70% of all the objectives we have seen in the market relate directly to GHG emissions. It doesn't mean that this is the sole interest, of investors, but typically we see issuers starting with what is well understood by market participants, being carbon emissions. And those instruments have been quite productive for those, highly emitting industries. For instance, we've seen some steel makers in China issuing some sustainability-linked instruments. We've seen some cement producers in India, and actually S&P Global Ratings and Vanessa worked on an SPO for the transaction, issuing sustainability-linked instruments. So we believe that the toolbox can accommodate, the Vietnamese needs when it comes to decarbonizing some sectors, protecting nature, conserving water, for instance, etc., etc. In addition, Mr. Tuan was mentioning, the green taxonomy. We believe at S&P Global Ratings that regulatory clarity is of the utmost importance because it gives market participants comfort on the integrity of the market transactions. What we have seen that taxonomies, so those official documents stating which activities are green, which activities are not green, used to be fairly binary. So it was green, not green, and they were quite static as well. A major evolution in the market we have seen in the past 3 to 4 years is the introduction of transition activities. So what are these activities? They are not green. They are not green like I was mentioning, EVs, electric vehicles are green. Yet they are not red. A coal power station is clearly a very carbon intensive asset. It's not consistent with a low carbon and sustainable future, right? Yet they are in between. So they are enablers to decarbonization, essentially. Meaning, so what does that mean? It means that they are a progressive and positive step compared to red activities, those very carbon intensive activities, yet they are not really compatible with a very low carbon future. So meaning they are an intermediate step. So let's see what Vietnam will come up with, but at least we believe that this regulatory push in favor of clarity, of transparency, so technologies coupled with clear, requirements, technical screening criteria, as we name them, are clearly supportive to the market to avoid money being misallocated or what Mr. Tuan was describing as greenwashing. So a few conclusions, a few thoughts on the way forward in Vietnam. So it's obviously very important for the government to execute on its national commitments. Mr. Tuan was mentioning, the net zero objective. You have the NDC of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 9% unconditionally by 2030. I think it's 25% or more conditionally. It's very important that the government remains committed to this objective to create some regulatory and some market momentum, because governments have been a driving force of sustainable finance across the region. That could be all the more be the case in Vietnam, since the government, central bank, SOEs account for 3/4 of Vietnamese dong bonds outstanding. Regulatory clarity is just the referee providing market participants with clear rules for the game. So we have already discussed that in the previous slide. Economic incentives are important, and they've proved quite successful across the region. You have several types of economic incentives, so can be clear and simple subsidies, helping fund seekers and fund providers with the cost of sustainability experts, so that we've seen in Singapore or Hong Kong, for instance, subsidizing second party opinions, which S&P Global ratings and Fin Ratings do provide. Some other regulators, they have provided some financial support for limited assurance providers, for sustainability reports, for verifiers, of sustainable instruments, and so forth and so on. Governments can also help bridge the economic gap with some technologies. For instance, I was reading that the profitability of 1 hectare planted with palm oil trees is 3 times as high as that of the same hectare kept, protected with forest and generating carbon credits. So 3 times as high. So there is here potentially an opportunity for public authorities to bridge the gap through carbon tax, through subsidies, and so forth and so on. Regional international cooperation is important, especially in ASEAN when it comes to the power grids, which, as you know, are typically not well designed for renewable power, because renewable power is intermittent and bi-directional, typically, whereby many customers have their own capacity, and at a time of excess power production, they just send back the power to the grid. Among market participants, capacity building is very important. This is why I would see this seminar organized by FinRatings as one of those extremely important and necessary sessions to share knowledge, to have debates, to agree, to disagree, to share ideas. Innovation is very important, even though typically you start small with technologies with everyone will understand, but over time you can diversify towards more complex instruments, and this is actually already happening in Vietnam, which is really encouraging. Public opinion is important because it's been a driving force. It's been a real push for government, to aim high in their sustainability agendas. In the Western world, it's been typically, and here in APAC, it's typically the younger part of the population, but that remains, an important driver of the market. Then also sustainability goes beyond carbon. I've been talking a lot about carbon because this is the main market interest for many market participants, but water, nature, pollution, plastic pollution is a plague in Southeast Asia, for instance. And really, if you add up all those elements, you have some very keen, dynamic market participants in Vietnam. They are cooperating, with other foreign, participants like S&P Global Ratings, or with some, other governments. I've seen that recently the EIB and the State Bank of Vietnam have agreed for a form of cooperation in green finance, and this is obviously very important because I've been talking about bonds, but the Prime Minister has his objective to increase the proportion of green loans to 10% of banks' loan books. So technical cooperation is very important. So adding up everything, still a young market, yet a vibrant economy, dynamic market participants. So the future looks bright, I think, for Vietnam sustainable finance. I will stop here and hand the mic back to Mr. Tuan.
Thanks for sharing the global trend and giving some colors on Vietnam, where we are positioning in the sustainable finance domain, and some ideas and suggestions for policy implication and for the markets practitioner as well. Thanks for that. And for the information, we have been working with S&P Global Ratings. Actually, they have done for some Vietnamese issuer, like some banks, non-banks, and FinRating as well. So I hope in the future we can have a more collaboration with the leading role in the world from S&P and supporting Vietnamese enterprises going green and issuing the sustainable finance by chance. And it's now coming to the very comprehensive section with our panelists. Physically here with three panelists and two join us virtually. So before introducing our panelists, and probably maybe I will let them have some their own introduction to audience, maybe better. But let me give some thoughts. The main topics for today's event is meeting the international standards. For the local, we are in the progress to issue the green taxonomy. Hope will be Vietnamese government will be issue it soon, especially after we seeing the resolution from the party and from National Assembly and so on. And the markets, voluntary market mechanism is still happening. That's important for Vietnam. And the capital markets, we understand, play a very critical role in mobilizing the green finance. And we think it's an urgent need to strengthen the sustainable finance framework and practice in Vietnam. And green bond and sustainable debt instrument is a great opportunities to channel the capital towards the environmentally beneficial projects and providing investor and creditors with the financial returns. So I think now we will spend about 60 minutes, or roughly more than that, 1 hour, for discussing with our expert and specialists here. And we have around 30 minutes for Q&A. We have received many questions from you before the event, but for sure we will be open up for direct or live discussion from audience if you wanted, especially with our policymaker here today. And let me introduce our distinguished panelists. So Mr. Bertrand Jabali, who just delivered our keynote, and he's the head of sustainable finance for Asia Pacific at S&P Global Ratings. I think, and the second panelist, let me introduce Associate Professor Nguyễn Đình Thọ. He is currently the Deputy President of the Institute for Strategy and Policy on Agriculture and Environment under the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment. Maybe, Mr. Thọ, you may have some few words to the participants, please.
I'm happy to be here. At the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment, I'm responsible for designing the green taxonomy and circular economy. I also have intensive experience with the portfolio management, fixed income and alternative assets, and familiar with S&P, Moody, and Fitch Ratings. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Thọ. And actually, this morning we have some catch up with him, and it's happened to me to know he used to be the banker, and knowing very well not only from policy settings for Vietnam, including the green taxonomy, but the functioning of the sustainable capital markets. And he used to work for Deutsche Bank in Frankfurt, and deeply involving in green and sustainable debt transaction. So happy to have you, Dr. Thọ. And the third panelist, let me introduce Mr. Vo Chi Dung. He is currently the head of legal and international relationship department of State Securities Commission. So maybe better for Mr. Dung. Thanks again for joining us, and better for you to have some words for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Thuan. Thanks for inviting me to join the panel. And I love the name of the conference on the meeting international and national standards, and also aligning international standards and local standards. And with SSC, I've been working for SSC for nearly 28 years, and also currently also ASEAN Taxonomy board member. So okay, doing the market facing for ASEAN. So would love to promote the ASEAN sustainability, also green bonds for the national states in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dung. So yes, the role of SSC and for public securities and so for public companies and capital market, very important. It's good to have you having you here, sharing the perspective not only from policy makings progress, but you know, to some from the for the market perspective as well, from the observation, and not only hearing from our guest speaker, the two policy maker here, but this today we will hear about we will hear from investor. So I would like to introduce Mr. Duy Bui. He is currently the Deputy Head of Financial Institution Investment at Climate Finance at the Responsibility Investment AG. So, Mr. Duy, can you have some greeting and a few words to the audience?
Yes, happy to do so. And thank you, Mr. Thong, for the invite. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here and speaking with you today. A few words of introduction. So I come from Responsibility. This is a Zurich-based, so Swiss-based asset manager that has been established from 2003. We focus on making impact investments across the world. So it's been 22 years of track record. Currently, the company manages about $6 billion of assets, and we are backed by M&G Group, which is a leading asset manager in Europe with also more than $400 billion of assets. Responsibility now invests in more than 70 countries globally, and we started making climate investments, green lending since 2014. So it's also 11 years of track record in this very important space. In my role of Deputy Head of Investments, I cover the global portfolio with a strong focus on Asia Pacific, and of which Vietnam is a very important market for us. Happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Duy. Happy to hear that your organization, Responsibility, already invested and have some support for local banks and local issuer going for integration with the ESG and impact investing. Thanks for joining us again. So not only from hearing from policymaker and investor, impact investor, but today we are very happy to welcome Mr. Phạm Ngọc Khang, General Director of Home Credit Vietnam, who will bring the experience in the financial service and sustainable business practice from the perspective of the financial institution. To be specific, is a non-bank financial institution licensed by the State Bank of Vietnam in Vietnam. So Mr. Khang, thanks for joining us, and I would like to invite you to have some greeting and few words in relevancy to our context of the event today. Mr. Khang.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me, and I'm very happy to join this panel, I would say. I think listening to all this presentation, what is quite striking for me is how much we speak about climate and decarbonization and all these types of bonds. But we can offer a different perspective from a consumer finance company, because we've been serving 17 million customers on their first-time credit history. And that means also that social agenda can be pretty high in this type of discussion. And I do believe that a small voice coming from the market and from the consumer side could be also reaching out through this conference to the informed parties. And obviously, from NBA 5-star perspective, we're looking for investors. So maybe we'll be able to meet some potential investors interested in what we do. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Khang. And for the information, and to be transparent, Home Credit Vietnam is our rating clients. We have rated Home Credit with single A ratings and with stable outlook. And they already have the international rating, but they still have set up the relationship with us for the domestic rating. And I hope that's is one of the action or preparation for utilizing the domestic markets. And Mr. Khang, we received some questions from audience today about your plan for sustainable debt instrument, because they're hearing a lot from commercial banks. Few of them already successfully issued the sustainable finance debt instrument, but non-bank financial institution, we haven't heard any transaction yet for Vietnam. So hope you can share some plan, if possible, or some direction from your organization in the panel. And last but not least, Mr. Tung Anh, our Head of Sustainable Finance Service at FinRating. So please, Tung Anh, have some introduction and some saying hello to audience. Thank you.
Greetings. We are the only domestic green bond verifiers with successful transactions up to date, and we are very happy to host the event. And feel free to have any questions that can help you to be ready for the next green bond issuance. Thank you.
Thank you, Tung Anh. You know, we have quite a mixed, board of the panelists today from different perspectives. And we will spend 1 hour from now to discuss in 3 main topics as an agenda we already published. So number 1, we will discuss about the current state of green bond and barriers to the development. I think let's continue from what Mr. Bertrand from S&P Global Rating just presented. And the second topic, I think very important, and we coming to more practical perspective, is the opportunities and potential sector for sustainable financing from both policy maker perspective, investor, issuer, and verifiers or like S&P or Fin Ratings. And lastly, it's the main topic of main theme of our webinar today is how we prepare. Vietnam should prepare to meet the green standards, international standards, and the alignment between the international standard and the national or local standards, hopefully to be issued soon. And I think that should be very good foundation, not only the foundation, but the catalyst for sustainable finance markets in Vietnam in many years to come. So we will spend about 25 minutes to 30 minutes for one topic. And for panelists, so because we have quite a lot of topics, question, so I would like you to spend maximum 3 minutes for one question for each panelist when I put out the question. So please to be straight to the point if possible. So let's start with the topic number one, the dive in the current state and barriers to the market development for the sustainable finance. So I have a first question to Mr. Vũ Trí Dũng. So as a head of legal and external affairs at the State Securities Commission, you have been instrumental in developing the Green Vietnam Green Bond Framework and Action Plan for the Green Growth in the securities market. So could you please update us on the current regulatory landscape for green bond in Vietnam, and what progress has been made since the launch of Green Bond Handbook, and what are the main barriers for that business are facing when considering the issuing the green bond? So, and then we would like to hear from some international perspective from Bertrand and Tung Anh, and from investor perspective from Mr. Duy as well, and Mr. Thọ as well. I mean Mr. Khang as well for this. I think the first question. Mr. Dung, please.
Thank you for 3 questions, not for just one question. So to update of the regulatory framework of green bond or green bond, and also some guidelines. You know that most of you know that Decree 153 and 65 on the framework of corporate bond issuance, and mostly in 2024, Circular 75 been issued by Ministry of Finance through guidelines on information disclosure, on reporting private placement and trading a private placement of the bonds in the domestic market. It is very important. Like the first speaker talked about transparency, clarity. So information disclosure is required for not only the issuance institutions, but also for regulator and investors. It is important. Since the specific speakers talking about allocating funding, so disclosure is to follow track down the proceeds allocating for bonds and green bonds, and it is very important because of the confidence. And issuance are talking about issuing green bonds. Investors are talking about and what is the benefits of investing in the green bonds in terms of the commercial benefits and also in terms of the environment benefits. So investors have different tests. Disclosure is placing all information that can have investor issuers decide. Investors need to meet issuers. Issuers need to meet standards. So it leads to the issues of having the guidelines by SSC and have a handbook by SSC. In 2021, we have the handbook on how to issue green bonds based on the ASEAN Green Bond Standards. And I joined the discussion of ASEAN Green Bond Standards and ASEAN Sustainability Bond Standard and ASEAN Sustainability Linked Bond Standards, meaning that SSC endorsed these ASEAN Green Bond Standards. So talking about the name of the conference, international and regional standards. So I mean that Vietnam is endorsing a local and regional green bond standards. So in the policy point of view, when aligning and endorsing these local and regional standards, so policies are towarding aligning Vietnam standard into the at least regional standards, and it will be very useful for the cross-border investment into green bonds, because some of the international company investor and global fund managers, they invest huge into ASEAN. So ASEAN member state will enjoy the part of it, but we have to meet the regional standards, and that's also for the guidelines. Because of transparency, confidence at the role of the SSC, we also provide the guidelines that you can get access to the guidelines on the website SSC in terms of reporting, ESG reporting, because having different taxonomies in the world, having different thresholds and standards, and company providing services not only to the local companies but the international ones have to meet different standards in different markets. So we provide the guidelines that companies can choose and decide what is the material information that they have to disclose. This is very important because when issuing green bonds, you need to target who is going to be an investor. Then you have to decide the framework and you have to decide information and prepare for it. So also helpful that for the services provider like Field Rating about verify what framework and what standards that verify against them, and that help and also support the issuers to decide, and also make sure that confidence there in the market, and for assurers or verifiers, you need to follow up the after the bonds issuance successful. And back to the issues of barriers, some barriers are being worked on in terms of the policy and in terms of the market practices. The first one is, from my personal point of view, is about the regulatory barriers in terms of having all the legal corridors in place. Because this is very new, we haven't had the ecosystem, and we have the issuers, but we need to have the verifiers, and we need to have the standards, and it linked to different corners of the economy. We need to have standards in criteria and standards in sector criteria and standards. Make sure that it's based on this one. The verifiers do design for green bond.
Thank you, Mr. Dung. You mentioned about the handbook and different policy development and the standards, but we will touch on that later. But I understand from the State Securities Commission as a regulator, you concerning not only the green bond or sustainable bond, but green investing or ESG investing as well. So, you know, in the credit markets, Vietnamese government or upper the government, the resolution 68, they mentioned about 2% interest rate subsidy for borrowers. That's very big changes. Of course, we need to see the implementation. I hope in the capital market or securities markets, and specifically for the green bond or sustainable bond, we can see more specific development for the economic incentive, like Bertrand pointed out. And for the information, and the speaker here may know well, last year we had around 5 green bond issued successfully, and 4 of them are the public companies. So this year, next year, or in the years to come, we hope to see more public company. Of course, public companies under SSC management, but we wish to see the non-public company as well in utilizing the sustainable finance. So Let's move. Let's direct to Mr. Bertrand. Building on your keynote presentation, what are the key global trends that's most relevant for Vietnam that policymakers and local enterprises here would need to consider as it develops its sustainable finance framework?
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's compare, the largest sustainable bond market in APAC, which is Japan, with $60 billion in issuance last year, and Vietnam, which is obviously much smaller, much younger, so developing, but arguably less developed. So what we see that to promote the market, first, typically governments are active market participants. They issue themselves bonds. And actually their share of bond has been growing a lot in the past year, and government bodies last year, I think they issued at 20% of total bonds across APAC. Then public authorities must handle both carrot and stick, I would say. So we've been discussing, a lot about the incentives, which are necessary sometimes, but the stick, it's more regulatory constraints. Though Mr. Zhong was stressing the importance of transparency, and I would echo that. So having some clear reporting requirements on showing transparency and integrity of the market gives trust to market participants, and hence bolster potentially the volumes of sustainable instruments. What we see that the larger markets tend to be more diversified as well. And again, I appreciate that today we are discussing about green, but in an emerging nation like Vietnam, there are social themes which could attract, considerable labeled funding as well. So in larger market, the government, public authorities and regulators, they tend to be mindful of both social and green, trying to promote both. And also, last but not least, when the latest, innovation we've seen in the market is really the emergence of transition bonds. But since those instruments are quite complex and there is no widely agreed on definition of what transition is and what those instruments should be as a result, it's probably a bit too early days for Vietnam. But again, having public authorities issuing bonds, promoting diversification, at least across green and social, having some incentives and some constraints as well, could be powerful drivers of sustainable finance growth in Vietnam.
Thank you, Bertrand. You mentioned about transition, not only the green, going beyond green, right? So that's an interesting topic. I think we will touch on it later. Because in Vietnam, we have been working with few banks, and it's easy for them to issue a green bond and have a lending for solar and wind, and with the very few numbers, a limited number of projects, and that's over. And now scaling up, they need to go to not only green, blue, or transition, even like some steel maker. They can issue the transition or sustainable bond, and how to be the framework they need to follow, and what should be the standards, clarities, Mr. Dung mentioned as well from regulatory perspective, and so on. And I think that's very interesting topic you pointed out as a from global trend. You mentioned Vietnam may be too early, but let's see. We can be slow for decades, but we can move very fast and very quickly. Thanks for that. And about the same topic, Mr. Tung Anh, as you are in charge of sustainable finance services at FinRatings, could you please share with us some data and trend on the current state of green bond market in Vietnam, and notable issuances has been seen to date, and what the standard they follow, and the alignment, and so on. And do you think this year or 2025 or next year will be more green bond transaction or sustainable transactions happening on the markets?
Thank you, Anh Thuấn. So just to mention that, after this, we all, Vanessa and I will also present a few case studies that we made with the SPO service that we provided in the market. A few of them are also awarded with regional reputations organizations. For the last year, I can see that S&P ratings, global ratings, and Fin ratings had a very active years, which we provide SPO for 2 issuers, and S&P also provide to 2 banks. That is to say, in this year, we may not be certain on the increase of the bond issuance, mainly because now we see very positive movement from the regulators. But also, we can see the trends of similarities when we heard about the upcoming release of the taxonomy that would cause issuers to wait for the right timing to ensure that they capture all the benefits, not only from the market, but also from the policy. But that is for the green bonds. For the green debt in 2025, I have a very positive view that with banks having more and more expertise and experience rolling out their green programs, not only with green loans, but also with others innovative products like sustainability-linked loans, and perhaps in the coming months, we'll see more social loans and more labor bonds and labor loans. So that is to say, we have uncertain view this year, but it will relate to national policy and how fast it can change to support the issuers and the borrower. Thank you.
Thank you, Tung Anh. From the green bond outstanding balance, less than 1% in the total bond outstanding now from our data. And with sharing from Tung Anh, and hopefully this year and the years to come, we can see more or some figures like more than 1% and then 2% and 3% or and so on for bond. For credit, green credits at the moment, that's the reported number, around 5% of the country's loan book, but frankly, it's not so clear. And that's all about reported figure from the banks, and we hope to see the taxonomy or standard to be issued, and not only for capital market, I mean for bond market, but for credit activities as well in the year to come. And now I would like to move on the same topic with asking Mr. Duy from responsibility. So as an investor, impact investor, Mr. Duy, you have invested in banks and non-bank enterprises in Vietnam. What the challenges do you face when considering the climate finance investment in Vietnam? And if possible, you may share with us some, you could share with some corporate leader here joining us today about the key criteria in your impact investment. When you screening the deal, the enterprises, the deal size, or what kind of sector you prefer, and what's the standard for the corporate governance and the minimum rating, credit ratings, and so on. So, Mr. Duy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Thong. So just to set the stage for the audience, what we focus on is in terms of, making investments in emerging markets, and it's more on the private side. So our typical approach is to work with companies and financial institutions bilaterally, providing them with a direct transaction loan package and also technical assistance for capacity building in the process, right? So from that perspective, we also track our global portfolio in terms of the importance of the markets and the exposure that we have in these various emerging countries. And what we see is that most of the largest markets of investment that we have globally are coming from Asia Pacific. Usually India and Vietnam would be among the largest countries in our portfolio. I'm happy to say that Vietnam is now the second largest market that we have across the 70 countries that we invest in globally. So that says a lot about the potential that we have for green financing in Vietnam. Now, if you ask me about the advantages of the country, I can go on for hours. But because the question is about challenges that we see in the market, maybe from my side, I would say three main challenges. So the first one is with regards to creating a climate strategy that is fully committed and backed by senior management of the companies or the financial institutions. Because from our experience, what we have seen is that having a strategy that goes really deep and integrated into the operation of the company would be the key success factor. In some cases, if the company just do that to check the box, or maybe they say that they have a big renewable energy that they need to finance and they need to issue a green bond for that, then that is not really working, because we need to see that strategy to be a long-term sustainable part of the operation for the long run. Then the second challenge is usually in terms of defining what is green and also measuring the impact. So from this perspective, we also see that having a green taxonomy or having a green bond framework would be really helpful, because that will address the first question: where do they start with their green lending journey? What can be potentially eligible as green activities? But in our perspective as a private investor, what we see is that typically there's a deeper question to that in terms of measuring. So how green is this activity? So the taxonomy would tell you that this specific activity is potentially green, can be considered as green, but it doesn't really tell you how much of a CO2 emission saving that can be a result of the activity, right? So there's that focus in terms of measuring the impact as well that can be a challenge. And with that, I'll connect to the third sort of challenge, that is the technical gap, because now that we know like where to start, what to start with, the next question is how to start, right? From the company's perspective, it's really important for them to be able to have that capacity to measure the impact, so that they can tell the stakeholders that this portfolio of green loans is really saving that much of CO2 emissions over a year or over 5 years, 3 years, whatever. So is our, also target to come with that technical assistance, capacity building, creating the baselines and also tools for the companies and institutions to measure the impacts, because in our view is very important. So with that said, the key challenges are threefold, as I mentioned, and I think that will also address the question, the second part of your question to some extent, because we don't really look at, like, let's say, what is a rating that is eligible or whatnot, but then in our assessment, we really try to identify companies and the FIs that really tick all of these boxes, like they have a committed strategy to green lending, to sustainable development, and they also have that sort of drive to work with our team first to overcome the challenge of measuring the impacts, and also in terms of capacity building, look at that long-term target rather than focusing on the short term only.
Thank you, Duy. It's very clear. You pointed out the three top challenges for Vietnamese enterprises going into sustainable financing. I'm with you, and having very clear framework and execution committed, and the regulatory clarity is important as well. So of course the investment criteria, you concern more about the impacts, and the challenges is meaning some implication for investment criteria. So for corporate leaders, so you may, if you want to connect with Mr. Duy, or we can help you to connect for and understand better their investment appetites and so on. So let's come now, before we hearing some further policy from Dr. Tho. But let's talk with one issuer here, Mr. Khang. From a financial institution perspective, considering to issue the sustainable debts to finance your growth, what challenges do you face in developing and implementing the green financial products? Are there any obstacles or home credits encounter when considering issuing sustainable finance? Maybe in your plan or radar, you can share. Because as I mentioned earlier, we saw only banks we haven't seen much non-bank financial institution issuing sustainable or even social debts in Vietnam. So, Mr. Khang, please.
Yes, I mean, with regards to this question, I would say maybe allow me to put a little bit of context, right? Because we are not doing really green in home credit. We rather do and address social agenda. And I think a social agenda in emerging economies are quite important, notably when you're basically kind of doing financial inclusion and education. So I would say there's different form of green, and these different forms of green, they need to be recognized. I look very positively forward to establishing framework for transparency, information disclosure, and basically having some base for us to be able to evaluate not only the environmental part of the framework, but also the social part of the framework. I really believe that to be able to address the discussion, I think you need to basically look at yourself as an issuer and being able to develop adequate ESG policies and sustainable finance policies. And that's where we're basically heading. You need to have some offer and some demand to a certain extent. So from our perspective, whenever we want to basically go in the direction of a green bond or a sustainable bond, you need to find an audience that would be willing to listen to us and consider us as eligible to a green bond. So it's not coming only from basically the issuer side, but it's also coming from the investor side. And it's true that at this moment, as NBFI, we are more recognized for our returns and from the quality of our financials than reality based for the quality of our ESG agenda. So how do we basically balance those two things? Strong financials and basically the right ESG policy and the consistency of the strategy we've been applying for the last 3-4 years, and the fact that we have ESG report available. That would be really one of the first challenge and barriers I see when we consider it from issuer standpoint. The second barrier, I would say, when you look at in terms of activity, what we should do, indeed, I mean, it's not manufacturing or energy, but it's helping basically developing green consumer behavior. So we are basically connecting businesses with green products, with consumers that would basically buy those products. And I would say one important factor to develop those habits and to get those financing is really to leverage this recent application of the positive reduction of 2% interest rate for this type of program, because they would really promote more sustainable behavior from the consumer. And I think that's also an important added value there. If we're able to basically have this matching between a demand and a more sustainable creation of behavior in terms of consumption. So for me, that's the second challenge, is how do you recognize this type of action so you're able to basically put some credit on it. I think the third barrier, and I kind of agree with Mr. Zui, is basically measuring. It's quite hard to measure actually at this point in time whatever we're doing, right? Because there's no real evaluation agency or real evaluation standard that allows us to be able to say, okay, this can be a tangible result that could be measured and reported back to the investor. So I think that's the third barrier that I can see when basically we discuss about challenges on the market. I can measure and recognize and really appreciate the effort in terms of getting more clarity and transparency. But I would say it's also coming from companies, issuers, who are able to also be able to match those standards with established strategy. And I think before even thinking green, we should think ESG.
Thank you, Mr. Khang. Thank you, Mr. Khang. So now I could understand better why the non-bank financial institution like yours organization have been coming up with some debt, sustainable debt, because you are dealing with millions of customers, not just like wholesale banking. They have 5 or 10 green projects they can easily lending. So understand, and that's why we see some development around the world and in the region for the what we call ESMS, environmental and social management system, and so on. and Vietnamese regulators. They are working on that as well, at least from the banking regulators. So now we would like to hear, and sorry for having you waiting for us so long, Dr. Thor. So from a policy development perspective, what are the key challenges in creating an enabling environment for green finance to support the Vietnam economic growth in general, and especially your areas about agriculture, modernization, and environmental goals? And you are the core team member or the leader of the team for taxonomy framework for Vietnam. Is good if to the extent you can share the status or progress for the green taxonomy for Vietnam. I'm not asking when it can be issued, but if you can give some hints or some indication for the issuance of that regulation, that would be excellent for our event today. So, Dr. Thor, please.
Okay, thank you for the questions. At the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment and Institute of Strategy and Policy on Agriculture and Environment, we are assigned the role for designing the market-based instrument for the law on environmental protection, and in which a green taxonomy is one of the important requirements for the issuance of the green bond and green loan. And according to that, Vietnam will have to issue the green taxonomy 2 years ago. Our deadline is 31st of December 2023. However, over the last few years, it has been difficult for us for the final regulation on who certify the green taxonomy for the issuance of the green bond and green loan. But now the draft has been finalized and presented to the Prime Minister for the decision, and I hope that the decision will be issued this year in 2025. The green taxonomy is very important not only for Vietnam but also for other countries, because it set up the criteria and screening for the projects that can be satisfied for the issuance of the green bond and the green loan. And as we know that the world is facing the triple planetary crisis, including the climate change and environmental pollution and biodiversity loss. And the green taxonomy is designed in the way that it will fit in and to help us with the addressing the top 3 priorities of the world. The first one is for the emission, the second one is for plastic pollution, and the third one is for biodiversity loss. And for that, I think that all the buying in Vietnam and company in Vietnam are waiting for the green taxonomy, because it's important, especially for avoiding the greenwashing and other issues. In some of the areas that is very important for Vietnam at the moment is, for example, the area of cement, steel, fertilizer, chemical, and aluminium, because the European Union has been set up the CBAM, CSRD, CSDDD, and also the deforestation regulation. With that, the green taxonomy will help the supply chains in Vietnam to fit in with the global supply chains. And I hope that this year, once the green taxonomy will be issued, it will help our businesses, including the agricultural sector, because the industry in Vietnam is fragmented, and we need some kind of the criteria to help them to fit in with the global supply chains.
Thank you, Dr. Thor. So I hope it's very good news for Vietnam and for the market, actually. We hope the taxonomy for Vietnam by Vietnamese government will be issued this year, because my observation, Vietnamese government committed in the COP26 in 2021, same with Thailand, but they already issued a few years back, and now they already have the 3rd amendment and very advanced. So I would encourage Vietnamese government and policymaker to issue as soon as possible. And of course, nothing is perfect. We can revise later next year or after putting into practice. So I hope they will all the markets from investor side, issuer side, and the markets they are waiting for that. So thanks for that. And now I'm coming to still in the current topics, but we are talking about the very interesting issue about the value from sustainable or green, going green. Mr. Dung, you have mentioned that Vietnamese enterprises face higher costs and more complex regulation burden when issuing green bond or green debt. So what specific policy or maybe from SSC or from Vietnamese government you think could be developed to support the local issuer enterprises in dealing with the cost for going green, especially in the sustainable finance like bond or debt. So can you share with that for the audience on that? Because in the banking credit, they have a very clear 2% subsidy for interest rate for green projects, circular projects, ESG qualify and so on. Of course, they need to have a detailed regulation, but from public company or capital markets, does the government or SSC or having some incentive economic for issuer or investor? So please have some colors on this to our event.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Issuing the bonds and in green bonds, talking about the cost, about it adding to the cost of all the issuance, and also seeing the cost is the first barrier of the issuer to have to get over. And like the investor, other speaker talking about the incentive, commercial incentives, and investor, other speaker talking about the investor point of view in terms of requirement or support the company in terms of having a strategy, delivering the green bond strategy, and also bring for framework for green bonds. And those are the things you have to pay for it. And when having framework, you have to be verified and you pay for it. These are totally the cost for issuance. So it's more than the cost for the convention bonds. And this is not the only issues of Vietnam green bond issues, a global issue. Because in like the speaker talking about incentives, like in Singapore, they have a fund.
Yeah.
And the fund is covering for the verifying cost for certain of the pioneer issuers, but not for all. But they have wealth and very supportive government in terms of financial strength. And some other markets having policies and incentive from policies. So from SSC point of view, incentive policies are set forth, not the commercial incentives. Like for green bonds, the cost in terms of the debt rate cost, registration cost, and the transaction cost for green bond transaction and green bond debt rate at the VSDC. So also in incentives, not the pre-issuance, it's after issuance. So they can after issuance they can enjoy that one. So those are the incentives that SSC have been set forth for investor. And in general, that policies is long term, really. Policy incentives is long term. So government is working on policy incentives rather than also commercial incentives, because commercial incentives are only a certain number of years. So then, and a certain number of the pioneers. So long term is policy incentives. And so for those are the thing. And for SSC, we also work with international partners and philanthropies, because those are really incentives that we can give, bring the investor into. Long-term investor will support companies, and with the policies, with the guidelines, and it makes everything clear. That is very important, because investor know where to invest. Company need know how to issue and what to disclose. So that will avoid any cost burden that they have to look around. And the last one in terms of the clarity, because clarity is also one of the disclosures is one of the costs associated with the issuance. So with the support, because giving the guidelines that support them, the companies to decide, because not everything has to be disclosed in one document for green bonds. They have to select the targeted investor. So it's also one of the things that they reduce the cost rather than avoid the cost. But in the long run, the cost is very important for investor and also for company, because it is initial cost, but for long run, they don't have to pay for revising or meeting the requirements in the long term in terms of the framework and in the region. In the region, database is important. Talking about this, it will link to the cost. Then verifiers have the database about the profile of company. So then it reduces the cost for verifying the cost.
That's
So it's
a way of the marketing, right? I mean, more investor knowing about their green profile, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's my point of view.
Thanks, Mr. Tung. He shared about the incentive from like if you have a green bond in Vietnam and you have a filing in the stock exchange, and we can have some reduction in the registration fee, right, from depository corporation and trading fee. But I understand from the public media, so Ministry of Finance is drafting some policy from tax incentive as well, like 50% reduction in the first year of the green project when they have a profit, taxable profit, and actually not 50% tax reduction on the capital gain for the first time the investor will realize the investment. I hope those policy will be put into practice because for Vietnamese enterprises, especially the small and medium enterprises, they care about the cost. Yes, but Mr. Dung pointed out it's like the investment. It's not really the expense of for the period. But you know, I'm the entrepreneur as well, so not easy decision for going green. So let's see. And the value from going green need to be clear as well for the local business community. We did some desktop research here at the FinRatings, and the greenium is very clear in European and some selected country in Asia and like Malaysia or Indonesia, but not very clear in some other country. For Vietnam, green bond, we didn't have long data yet, trading yield yet, but we see a lot of value from going green in terms of the coupons for the primary issuances and the tenor and the subscription, like you mentioned about going green, and a lot of investors like from responsibilities and many other, they have interest. So it's like better demand for the green and sustainable debt because many of them have a mandate for impact investing, but actually it needs more efforts and time. So that's make me putting a question to Mr. Bertrand from international perspective. That's one of the challenges for local businesses here. They're concerned about the cost. They're concerned about the value from issuing green or sustainable finance. And many of them simply ask me and Tung Anh when you talk about the green bond or sustainable debts. So what should be the going green? Is that cheaper interest rate, or what should be the value? So Bertrand, can you share some thoughts or some observation from your international on the greenium or the value from going green on the sustainable finance, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Tuan. And I would echo your observation whereby you have contrasted evidence on the greenium. So meaning that the same bond, the same issuer, the same maturity, the same creditworthiness, then they would pay cheaper for a green instrument. It's not necessarily the case, because at the end of the day, the drivers of a bond or loan price are the maturity, the creditworthiness of the fund seeker, and the currency, right? So then, taking a step back, why would you bother go green as a Vietnamese issuer while Mr. Zhong was stressing that you may have some upfront, cost? To me, and really here, this is a pure credit analyst perspective, there are benefits in terms of liquidity. Why? If you are looking at the labeled bond issuances, they tend to be oversubscribed. It doesn't translate necessarily into tighter pricing, because we know how it works. Let's say a given bond offering is 100, you're an investor, you want 5 out of 100, then you foresee that it will be oversubscribed, and then you're asking 15 to get eventually 5. So there is kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. But clearly, sustainable investors are very keen to put their money to good work. We have seen sustainable bonds being easily refinanced because of this strong market appetite. So on the one hand, I would say questionable benefits in terms of cost. It may well be the case or not, depending on the window of opportunity, right? The window of market opportunity, but clear benefits in terms of liquidity. Typically, labeled instruments are attracting a wider pool of investors, and they tend to be fairly loyal, and they remain invested into the instrument. So easier refinancing typically later on.
Thank you, Bertrand. It's the same with us here. It's quite mixed finding, actually, and not easy to have evidence from value or greenium on the pricing. It's not easy. But for Vietnamese markets, and Mr. Dung and Mr. Tho, last year we worked with a few green issuer. So they got some support, financial support from international organizations like Global Green Institute or ADB, Asian Development Bank. They share some costs of, they support building the framework. They pay the cost for the green bond verification, paying to us or to S&P and supporting for the marketing as well. So that's more from the voluntary mechanism without regulation, enforcement. And they have an investor push. And now very good. We are working in some green bond or sustainable bond. If they are not qualified, they will not subscribe for that. So that's the clear value from going green. Of course, it's taking time to realize or to see the value or the return from investment you just mentioned. Of course, they need to pay some costs, financial, monetary costs, or even the efforts from their resources, human resources, and so on. But in the medium and the transaction we work in the past few years, the observation is that the value is very clear in terms of tenor, in terms of the demand for that, subscription for that, and even pricing. Of course, the pricing at the end of the day is a rating. I usually say some joking to our Vietnamese friend and policymaker. We cannot say this lady is beautiful if, is a strong credit or financially strong if she have a good makeup. So it's more about carrot or incentive, but it's taking time, especially for small and medium enterprises in Vietnam, and that's fair to put out this question. So now I think we are closing the topic number 1. We mentioned a lot about the current state of the sustainable finance, the challenges from both investor and issuer side, and the policy development, and some critical issue for going green as well, like the cost and the value from going green, so-called the greenium and so on. So let's move on more specific topics on the opportunities and potential sector. What kind of sector are potential for sustainable finance? So I would like to put the first question to Dr. Tho. Which for the agriculture and environmental sectors, do you believe the most compelling opportunity for green bond financing or green financing, or any ideas for other, or infrastructure, or what kind of sector you think for potential for sustainable financing, please?
I think as the at COP29, it has been confirmed as we have an opportunity for green finance, sustainable finance, and climate finance in almost every sector, because the transitional finance has also been introduced and confirmed that it will have a significant impact on the emission reduction. And that's why we can focus on the area on NEC, that is the industrial process, on the agriculture, forestry, and land use change, and also on the energy, waste treatment. All of that area have a potential for emission reduction and can attract the green finance and climate finance. Also, as a COP29 country has agreed to increase the climate finance from 100 billion per year since 2009 to 300 billion US dollar per year, and it will be expected to increase to 1,300 billion US dollar in 2035. And thus create the opportunities for firms in Vietnam to participate in the global green supply chains, because we are one of the countries that have the highest openness in the world, with the export and import almost double the GDP of Vietnam. And all of the small, medium enterprise, even household business, rely on the global supply chains. And we know that the European Union has been set up, the CBAM, and also they require the CSRD for non-financial green sustainable reporting, and the CFDDD will require the whole supply chain to have the reporting to meet with the green finance and sustainable finance requirement. And that's why we can see that the MNC and the international firm may refuse to have a trade or investment with the firm in Vietnam if we are not satisfied for the ESG or non-financial sustainability reporting. And with us, we can see in agriculture now we have a lot of opportunity in forestry. For example, the North Central area carbon credits has been issued to attract 51.5 million US dollar. And we currently have the 1 million hectare price, low emission and high quality, that also require 2.7 billion of green finance. And according to the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment estimate, 1 million investment will get back 4 million investment in return. So that's apart from the agriculture, we can see the other area, for example, transportation. The electrification of transportation will also bring a lot of the climate finance and investment. Countries around the world, leading by California, China, and other countries, provide significant support for the use of electric vehicles. And the area in manufacturing, in waste treatment, for example, wastewater treatment, and also the establishment of green building in the urban area, that IFC has provided a lot of fund for the building the office that satisfies the requirement of LEED, of S, or the Lotus requirement of Vietnam. So I can see that in the next coming year, the green finance will dominate the market and provide opportunity for the firm to get low interest rate as compared to the traditional brown economy.
Conventional. Thank you, Dr. Thor. So, Mr. Tung Anh, how do you think what sector could be the most readiness or for green bonds or green financing, especially when the green taxonomy will be effected maybe by the end of this year?
Yes, I would like to echo Mr. Thor on the sector's focus of green buildings and environmental protection, such as water supply, water management, wastewater management, and others that would be specified in the Vietnam taxonomies. You can see that when we talk about green taxonomy, it's more like giving a sense of what is the best for to help protect the environment, and that would be more intuitive approach to help issuers that we do recycling or we do renewable energies. That would be the first starting point to explore the green finance, or either issue with green bonds or giving out green loans. For this case, I would say that outside of such green categories, we can see that there will be more from not just within the taxonomy, but more developments within the social aspects. Because as we mentioned before, this is a sustainable finance workshop. We can see credit institutions and non-FI to start giving out social loans for vulnerable peoples and women-led business. And we also can look into the transition finance as well, as green finance may not be enough and transitions becoming more and more significant. So last but not least, I hope that the taxonomy would not just the end point, but also the starting point for more taxonomy, not only green, but also transitions, as we can see other countries in ASEAN happening to roll out the transition taxonomy, for example, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore.
Thank you, Tung Anh. I'm with you, and hope we have next version of not only green taxonomy, but transition taxonomy. As we mentioned, it's lending or giving money to solar and farm or wind is quite not so easy, but giving for mass majority or millions of people in the retail banking is like home credit is very challenging. And I would like to ask Mr. Khang. I believe banking bond and bond issued by the financial institution is this year and coming year still dominating the corporate bond markets in Vietnam. So the question for you is, so what sustainable finance products or that home credit is currently developing or considering? And how do you see the investor interest and appetite on this product from your own observation, if you can share to the audience?
Well, I mean, there's not been much on the market, right? Obviously, I mean, as Mr. Jaboulé was kind of telling us, right? There's not so wide variety of products that could be available for that. But in terms of how we would like to work on this, I think it's a lot about what's the objective of the bond financing that you're looking for. What's the clarity of the goal strategy that is set, and how do you measure it? I know I'm repeating a little bit myself, but to a certain extent, I can see a lot of benefit in developing products that would favor green consumption. And what I mean by green consumption is being able to leverage funding from those climate financing organizations to basically help connecting customers to green products, and then being able to offer more favorable financing package to customers that would be willing to embrace green consumption. Obviously, all of this needs to come into a taxonomy, right? So it's not actually only about what we will to do, but it's also about how the taxonomy is helping us to get these type of objectives recognized. And I hear a lot about green financing more in environment protection, energy, but there should be a little bit more room for basically green consumption in general or developing green consumer behavior. And that's where we would be basically considering developing this type of product. The second aspect I would like to emphasize is there was a lot of discussion on refinancing and liquidity as an advantage. Obviously, when we tap into this green bond, it's really about liquidity and refinancing because the investment we do on this type of policies requires not only that you have incentive, but you can sustain basically favor a loan package for green consumption so that it's not a one time, but it's a consistent effort over time. So it's really about how you consider also financing and incentive in basically promoting habits that would need to be basically anchored into customers' life from now up until the next 3 years. So the tenor is quite important, the liquidity is quite important in relation with the objective and the use of proceeds that would be the intention of issuing products like green products.
Thank you, Anh Khang. So very quick question to continuing that topic for the debt instruments, sustainable. So Bertrand, from S&P's perspective, international perspective, can you name, just simply name some innovative products or instrument that could be potentially for the Vietnamese market in the coming years or in the future from your international observation? Because now we focus on green. It's quite actually straightforward, I have to say. But some more complex or innovative, what's the name or what's the brief, very quick ideas? 1 minute, please.
No, absolutely. Oh, okay, very sure. Now, I don't think that innovation will necessarily come through more sophisticated instruments. It's more, the characteristics of those instruments. So if you're looking at use of proceeds, for instance, when it comes to green, we see two marked trends these days in global markets: financing of green data centers, with the criteria around their PUE. And we see a lot of agriculture, forestry, finance. As you know, the COP16 was held last year in November in Colombia, and it has really accelerated interest into those, nature-based solution and nature protection. So then we've seen also those, debt for nature swap, which were really, really innovative for highly indebted countries, with international creditors giving up part of their claim in return for borrowers protecting nature. When it comes to sustainability-linked instruments, we have seen a welcome diversification away from carbon, with increasingly some social objectives around health and safety or about the representation of women in the leadership of companies. So not so much, with the exception of debt for nature swap, not so much innovation in terms of product, but much more about the coverage of those products.
Thank you. So I think we concluding the second topics on the key sector. I think it's very comprehensive already. So now let's move on the last topic, the topic number 3. I think the most important is meeting the green standards, Vietnamese version, Vietnamese standard and international standards. So I would like to, Dr. Tho, you already share about the green taxonomy and the plan for issuance those regulations this year. But I would like to have some specific question for you. How important is to ensure the alignment between the Vietnamese taxonomy and international, and specifically for the agriculture and environment policy for the financial markets requirement? So can you share some color on that?
when we build the green taxonomy, we have the support of GIZ, IFC, and the World Bank. As such, the Vietnam Green Taxonomy has been built in harmonizations with the IFC, World Bank Green Taxonomy, and also the European Union Green Taxonomy. We also work with the ASEAN member countries so that our green taxonomy can be in conformity with other ASEAN member countries and the ASEAN framework. And when we construct the green taxonomy, the knowledge and expertise from the world top climate bond initiatives and ICMA has been also used, and so that we can assure that the green taxonomy of Vietnam are very much in alignment with other green taxonomy. The most important things in the green taxonomy is that we know that no area is completely green. Even the area like solar energy or offshore wind energy also have the problem with the treatment of the applied waste of that area energy, renewable energy. And because that, the focus of the green taxonomy is on the main positive environment property of that projects. And we can see that the UK has promoted for the transitional finance, and transitional finance can even work with the traditional sector, steel, cement, if they can have the solution to addressing the triple planetary crisis, especially in emission reduction. And so I can assure all of you about that. We will also continue to work to improve the green taxonomy like other countries in the world.
Thank you, Dr. Tho. So good to hear that actually, because any taxonomy for local taxonomy must be, used or accepted by not only the domestic investor but the international investor as well. So how about Mr. Dung from SSC? From capital market perspective, what SSC is going to do to ensure the local green bond standard remain credible in the international markets and the alignment with the regional like ASEAN green bond standard and so on. So any plan or action plan, assuming the Vietnamese government will issue the green taxonomy for the country?
Yeah, like I echo the comment from Dr. Tho about the alignment. For ASEAN, as I discussed previously about the ASEAN Green Bond Standards, Vietnam joined from the beginning when ASEAN was developing the ASEAN Green Bond Standard, Sustainability Bond Standard, and also ASEAN Taxonomy. So the alignment is very important because it should be well recognized by all ASEAN member states. And will be adopted by all member states. So alignment is very important. When one is supporting ASEAN as a community, as an asset class, the other also support member state. And the other word we has been using is interoperability among these taxonomies and thresholds, because it will lead to issues of how the investor be treated, national taxonomy and ASEAN taxonomies. And in terms of EU, ICMA, CBI taxonomies, that will be alignment. And we have been talking about the ASEAN taxonomy as a living document. So be added on, because there's not only approaches, but also technical screening criteria. It is one that harmonization, because it's towing the same goal for the whole, for going green. And besides that, it's a transition. Because ASEAN, putting ASEAN in circumstance where we have different status. So transition is very important, like in Vietnam, emerging market, transition is very important. And so we'll decide whether going green or having transition. So ASEAN also talking about transition and transition standards. That will support the latecomer and joining the ASEAN taxonomy, won't having transition guiding to green. So Vietnam is emerging market, joining the beginning. Alignment is there, talking about the ASEAN taxonomy, about sectors and technical screening criteria. And I also, when joining ASEAN taxonomy board member meeting, also refer to Vietnam taxonomy and bring it to the ASEAN taxonomy that they see this is alignment. This is really criteria that we are now following. And this is the approach that we are taking. So that seeing alignment, so that seeing we are on the right track, at least in the regional context. But for international context, ICMA is well recognized and CEPA is well recognized. So covering not only green, blue, climate, and sustainability, you can name any names of the bond, any of the names. And that thing leading to this question about innovative products or financial products, ETF, exchange traded fund is important because it could be bringing the capital into the sustainable company through these financial products. So developing the index for sustainable index is important.
Pointed out about that topic, very interesting, but it's more about green equity or ESG investing. I think we will cover in the future topics. So today more about sustainable finance or debt, I mean. So thanks, Anh Dũng, for this. But one of the concerns from me and from some major investor, is the Vietnamese taxonomy. I'm not sure you all look at the draft version, but it's more about rule-based. Why the ICMA, International Capital Market Association, and climate bonds and initiative, ASEAN, and so on, is more about principle-based. So that's raised some concern about the application later on in practice, everyone. So I would like to hear one comment from impact investor, Mr. Duy. I'm not sure you have a look at the draft taxonomy of Vietnamese government or not, but I believe your organization have your own system for ESG or taxonomy and so on, or you follow some international standard or else. So can you share some comments on that, and for the importance of the alignment between the local taxonomy and the international? So do you have any concern on that, or you feel very comfortable for adoption for Vietnamese market, because you cover global as well? Mr. Duy, please.
Yes, happy to do so. Thank you, Mr. Thong. So in our view, it's very important to have this kind of established framework in the country of Vietnam. So either we talk about a green taxonomy or the compliance or sticking to the green bond framework. This is a very good and important starting point. The very big signal that it sends to the market and international investors is that there would be some kind of standardization in the market, and people would know that they are looking at this certain kind or certain group of green loans that are being financed with their investment. And more importantly, if an issuer is following this kind of green taxonomy and green bond framework that is aligned with regional and international standards, that would also give them the assurance that the checks and balances, the safeguards exist in place. So in my view, that is a very first and important perspective and signal that is there in the market. Having said that, you're totally right that for private investors, again, like us, we would also have a balancing approach to that, because from time to time, we see a lot of value in supporting our investees to create their own sort of green lending strategy, climate strategy in their operation. And it comes back to the point that I mentioned earlier in terms of measuring the impact of the investments of the loans in terms of CO2 savings, CO2 emission savings. Why this is important is because, well, there are some, let's say, potential products that may not be in the taxonomy, or certain investors that identify themselves as dark green following Europe SF regulations would require that very specific information about impact measurement. So this is for us, that is something that is very important. When we do invest in a transaction, we usually spend a significant amount of technical assistance support. So this is coming from the public investors in our fund, in our company. They have this pocket of technical assistance that can be several hundred thousands of dollars to support the investees, because this is where the impact is created. Certain products that do not have the baseline for measurement, the capacity for measurement yet, we come in with that support to help them measure. So this is where the balancing factor is coming through. And I think also connecting to some of the questions we have seen from the audience, this is quite important to avoid greenwashing, because I fully agree with some of the fellow panelists like Professor Thor and Mr. Zung have mentioned that not everything, like every sector is not entirely green. There's always that sort of gray area that could result in some kind of potential greenwashing, some potential ENS risk that we have to be very careful of. So it's quite important for investors like us to keep a close eye on the specifics of the project, the measurements, and also the management of ESG risk, for example. But if we can successfully do that, the measurement of the impact, then it will broaden the scope of green lending significantly. And here I connect again to what Mr. Kang mentioned earlier. In fact, we have been financing some of these, let's say, consumer home appliances product that can be eligible as green loans. The process is the same. We create a baseline for these home appliances products. And then if the institution is financing any customer for the purchase of these appliances, like an air conditioner or a washing machine that is having, let's say, 5-star energy label, uses less energy than the traditional baseline, then that can also be eligible. So that is the typical process. And the last remark I have on this question is, again, I think it's very important to have this blended cooperative approach among stakeholders in the sector, because here we have seen, speakers, panelists from the public sector being very proactive in their work, being very instrumental in the development of the sector, and this kind of support in the blended structure in terms of creating the right policy framework, in terms of incentivizing the other players in the market, that, in my view, would create a very important playground for international investors, for private players to come into the market and also collectively develop and broaden this green lending sector in Vietnam, which has a lot of potential.
Thank you, Duy. I think we are going to conclude the panel discussion. Very long, very lengthy, actually, more than 1 hour already. We cover from the challenges, the state, the current state and challenges, and the potential, and talking about the green taxonomy. The first time ever, green taxonomy for Vietnam going to be issued soon, hopefully within this year, like mentioned by Professor Thor. So we all looking forward to seeing that, and for later on for the actual implementation by the banking sector, by the capital markets, securities market, and the whole market as well. So now we have, I think we have around 10 minutes more for Q&A before we move on some technical section. And we have a lot of questions here, but I'm afraid we don't have enough time. So let me ask Dr. Thor one question, and then I will open up for the any live question from audience here, direct interaction. I prefer to do that. The question here is about very high level, Professor Thor. How's the impact from Trump 0.2 to the global net zero target for any implication for Vietnam? We got the question from a big banker. Sorry, I couldn't name here, but they are very big green mover in Vietnam, international. And you know, the background here, they put some blankets. Some American banks, they already, you know, gathering and not, you know, withdraw from Paris Agreement or so on. I don't know. So any impact from Trump administration, what Trump is doing for the war going to the net zero, and maybe some any impact for Vietnam?
Okay, we know that the U.S. is the largest emission investor in the past, and now China is the one who is the largest emission in the world. And the problem of the emission for US is not now. Come back to 1943, California started its air pollution control, and it addressing the emission of air created by the industrial progress in the past. And that process has been developed for a long period of time. Now it's more than 80 years. And we can see that it's difficult for any president to change the trend towards coping with the pollution, air pollution and emission. With that, I can confirm that the Trump can do a lot of things during his presidential term. For example, come back to use a fossil fuel, encourage UK and European country to turn back to the fossil fuel for the reason he explains, that is the fossil fuel is very cheap and it will reduce inflation. As Trump trusts that the environmental pollution only increase the cost to the economy and create inflation. And that's why he tried to come back and use the fossil fuel as a main energy source in order to cope with the inflation around the world now. Okay, I think that's it is just a temporary trend, but it will not be able to change the global trend even in the US. Some of the policy on air pollution control started in the US since in 1943, and some of the initiatives that started in 1970, for example, electric vehicle credit, and also the zero emission vehicle has been started in the US, and all other countries in Europe, in China, in Japan, and in other countries learn from the US experience to implement the same policy in their country. And we can see that Beijing has also controlled the air pollution similar to California in 1943. With that, I can confirm that even Trump 2.0 may have a significant negative impact on the climate finance, and it's slow, delay, and making discourage the fund investment, the banking sector, and other pioneer in the green finance to follow the past. As we can see that a lot of progress has been making since the Paris Agreement in 2015 until the COP29, when the world can confirm $300 billion per year to support the developing countries. And this trend is still continue, and at COP29, they have promised to increase to 1,300 billion per year in 2035. So I think that's the Trump 2.0 will have a negative impact, but for temporary period of time. But in the long term, the world will have to deal with the emission reduction, and green finance, climate finance will continue to be the long-term trend.
Thank you, Professor Thor. Actually, I still seeing some American banks, they still purchasing carbon credit, actually. Even politically correct, they say to the public they don't care much about ESG or so. So let's see. And now open up for the audience. Any one of you would like to have a direct interaction question to our speaker here, panelists here, especially the policymaker? So can you, the organizing team, can you open up for direct question from audience? No, I would like to have a direct interaction. No, not ready. So waiting for the IT resolution. I would like to put. We receive here some interesting question. I would like to direct to Mr. Dung. So in the absence of ESG scoring system, how banks and company could evaluate and process their customer loan application or their compliance with taxonomy? You have any answer to this question?
Yeah, this is for the bank. As I know that bank, they have the criteria for verifying the document for the bank loan, and also the catalog. And there's also requirement of the risk in terms of environment risk don't cover, and so banks are administering the funding from the foreign banks. So they also following the requirements of the original of the bank in terms of verifying the bank loan document, and they have their own criteria for the bank loan in internal requirements, also by the partner, and there's also requirements of the risks, environment risks that will be have to follow requirement by the central bank, and it also there already in the bank loan requirement in terms of green loan, and there's also some of the demand from financial institutions giving the loan to potential borrower in terms of investment to the green projects, and they have to follow the current requirement in terms of environment protection. So
ESMS, right?
Yeah, right.
Environmental and social management system. Thank you, Mr. Dung. I got an interesting question as well about the transition finance. The question is, how can a loan of a bond be classified as a transition finance without being accused of greenwashing? So I would like to direct this question to Mr. Tuong Anh or Bertrand from verification or second-party opinions provider. Do you have any answer?
Sure.
New for Vietnam.
This is a big challenge actually, and this is maybe why the asset class has not really gained momentum so far, because as explained, we had like 25 billion equivalent globally in transition bonds. If you remove Japan, it's like 5. And if you are looking at Japan, most of the use of proceeds are actually more green per se than really transition. So to me, in the absence of clear market understanding of what transition means, those labeled instruments will remain a bit challenging for market participants. ICMA and other standard setters have been working, on providing clarity on the concept. So hopefully that will come in the next few months.
And any colors on this, Tuong Anh?
Yes, just a quick one. So for Vietnam context, it's more like a benefiting cost, which is not a very clear incentive and also penalties for the local markets, especially for issuers. navigating that would require true understandings of the regulations and also with clear guidance. And through the transactions that we are trying to help recently, it is quite, I have to say it's quite difficult for, when the issuers first starting to issue the bonds, it's already difficult as they may be new, they may be frequent issuers, but now they have to adding more and more, and it's more like uncharted regions. So overall, I believe that it should be not only with the regulation, but also with the capacity buildings and also with the involvement of the market participants. Like we have the MOU with GGGIs on helping the green bonds issuance. We also support for free trainings and capacity buildings for issuers. We giving out for free and also, like try our best to support the markets. So let's see how it goes.
Thank you, Tung Anh. The organizing team is open for the audience direct or no? Not convenient. Okay. So thanks. Sorry for that. So I think we are going to conclude the panel discussion and Q&A. So we talk a lot about things about the challenges and especially about the green taxonomy to be issued and the transition finance, very potential and proven elsewhere in the world with the sharing from our colleagues from S&P Global, but very new for Vietnam, especially for banking and financial sector. It's very easy to do green finance for some solar farm or wind or big project, mega projects, big tickets of lending or bond. But the impact for the whole economy could be, I think we would be waiting for some transition or blue bond or some, the vast majority of the sector, like Dr. Tho mentioned, and we talk about the potential sector, and we hope to hear the first ever green taxonomy to be issued soon this year by the Vietnamese government, and follow up with the development on transition finance and amendments. I think so. That's a lively process, not one-time regulation. Thank you, Professor Tho and Mr. Dung and Tung Anh and Mr. Duy and Mr. Khang. Thanks a lot for your time and for your sharing perspective. It's very invaluable for our event, and I hope for the audience as well. So having said that, I would like to say thanks everyone again and the audience for the attention. And we are open for any follow-up question after the event today. So thanks everyone, and over to Tung Anh.
Yes. Thank you, Vincent, for these long but also informative sessions. So now we'll be moving to the sessions with myself and Vanessa, and that'll be we can Vanessa for the sustainable finance specialist from S&P Global Ratings. We share the international best practice in the second party opinions and climate transitions assessments. And after that, I will be following with case study from Fin Ratings recent sustainable finance reports, including several transactions that we have mentioned briefly from time to time. So I leave the floor to Vanessa, and please share your slides. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen just to confirm my screen is up now.
Can I check with Vanessa if she can share the slides? Not this one.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. This is Vanessa from S&P Global Ratings Sustainable Finance team. I am based in Hong Kong, and we had the opportunity to work with a few Vietnamese issuers before. So in this session, I would like to share our methodology and also some key takeaways from our work in Vietnam. Then I will pass the time to Mr. Thong An to share some case study. So just some background information. There are a few independent associations in the market, such as the Loan Market Association, LMA, the International Capital Market Association, ICMA. They have set some voluntary principles to define the characteristic of these label instruments. So there are two major types of label instrument in the market. The first one is use of proceeds, meaning that the fund raised by this instrument has to be used to finance green or social projects with certain environmental or social benefits. But in contrast, sustainability-linked instrument is a general corporate purpose finance, meaning that it doesn't have to be used to finance green or social projects. It can be used for any general purpose. But then the financial characteristics of these instruments are tied to some key performance indicators, KPI. And some companies seen KPI could include greenhouse gas emission reduction or the share of female in the management level. Today, I would like to focus on the green use of proceeds. So for our SPO second party opinions, we will opine on the 4 elements of the principles, which are the use of proceeds, project evaluation and selection, management and proceeds, and also reporting. Within use of proceeds, we will apply our shade of green methodology to assess the environmental benefits and risk of every environmental project in the framework. Just to note that every project has to receive at least a light green shade in order to have an overall aligned opinion. I will explain later on how we determine the shade, but the reason behind is that the green loan or the green bond principles require that the proceeds has to be used to finance projects that with clear environmental benefits. So if we think that project is not green, then it will not fulfill this use of proceeds requirement. This is the scale of the shade of green. It comes from red, orange, yellow to light green, medium green, and dark green. Red represent activities that are not consistent with a low carbon future, while dark green is a long-term solution with that low carbon futures. And the shades in between represent different degree of transition towards that vision. So how do we assign a shade? We will use a value chain approach, meaning that we will look at both the upstream and the downstream impact of a project. For example, what are the climate impacts? What are the potential physical risks or other environmental issues such as water, waste, or biodiversity? We will also take into account the jurisdiction differences because different region has different contexts in terms of the transition journey. An example could be hybrid vehicle. Hybrid vehicle could be green in some markets where electric vehicle is still not that common, but the same hybrid vehicle could be not green in other regions such as the Nordics, where electric vehicles are already quite developed. So the hybrid vehicle is kind of like a step back. So after considering all these factors together, we will assign a shade. Here are some examples. For example, like green buildings and waste management. These are typically light green. There are some important steps to that low carbon future, but they are not in long-term solutions. Medium green, such as batteries. There are some significant steps towards the no carbon future, but still some improvement are required. Renewable energy, they are dark green because they are a long-term solution to that low carbon future. Here's a more detailed example on how we look at green buildings project. In this case study, the issuer used established green building certifications such as BREEAM and LEED, but they are not targeting the highest level. For example, LEED Platinum is the highest level of that certification, but they will also accept LEED Gold. beyond certification, they did not set any energy performance improvement targets or thresholds. But in this case, it is good that they will not use any fossil fuel-based heating or cooling. And the potential physical risk and biodiversity risk are already covered in the environmental impact assessment process. But this building has some exposure to the carbon-heavy power grid because these buildings are located in China, and the issuer do not have any policy in managing their embodied emissions. Embodied emissions are the greenhouse gas emissions come from the materials and the construction process throughout the life cycle of the buildings. So considering all these factors together, we assign a light green shade to this project. So from our work in Vietnam, here are some observations. Firstly, for financial institutions, the disclosure on finance emission are still developing. And in general, the decarbonization roadmap may not be ready yet, although they have already set some sort of decarbonization targets. And in the framework we see, they tend to fund projects that aims to address carbon emissions and pollutions, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, water management, or agriculture. And due to the local context, there could be still some involvement of fossil fuel-based equipment or assets. And from the framework we saw, the eligibility criteria are relatively broad, but this is where maybe the upcoming taxonomy could be helpful with. And for some issuers, they use both local and international standards or certifications. This can add some local context as well as referencing the international best practices. Now I'll move on to the climate transition assessment. This is a point-in-time qualitative analysis on an entity transition, but it is not focusing on 2050. It is not validating the net zero target, nor an assurance of the company's data. The assessment can be applied to any company, so it is also not sector-specific. The assessment will have 3 building blocks. The first one is current earnings. We will use the same shade of green methodology to assign a shade to each business segment of the company. Then we will look at the transition plan. What are the metrics and targets, associated actions and investment to achieve those targets, and what are the drivers or blockers that will impact the pace of transition. Then we will assign a future shade. This is where we think the company will be at by a certain time frame. So looking at the first building block, the current earnings, we will use a financial matrix that can represent how the entity various activities contribute to its earning. We will usually use revenue. Then we will break the revenue down based on the business segment of the company and assign a shade for each segment according to its environmental characteristics. Then for the second building block, transition plan, we will first look at the matrix and the targets. What is the scope of the targets? Is it relevant and material to the company? What is the time horizon? Is it an interim or a long-term target? And is that target consistent with some science-based decarbonization pathway? Then we will look at the corresponding actions and investment. Will the company invest in the research and development of certain transition technology? Or what is the amount that they will spend to fund and enable the transition? Then lastly, implementation drivers. You will include the governance, financial management, and also any blockers, such as any reliance on technological innovations that can impact the pace of the transition. After looking at all of these factors, then we will assign a future shade by a certain time frame. It can be a single year or can be a foreseeable future. This is when we think that the entity committed transition action should materialize by then. That's the end of my presentation. I will pass the time to Tong An to share some case study. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you for that comprehensive overview of S&P methodologies and framework. And now I would like to shift our focus from theory to practice by sharing some real applications here in Vietnam. Lucky that we have a few cases, which is quite a good years that we have with green finance, but we hope for the better. So I start with walk you through to the 5 case studies from FinRatings. Works in sustainable finance, covering diverse sectors from renewable energies to water infrastructures. And this case demonstrates how international standards are being successfully implemented in Vietnam market. I'll start with the landmark achievement for FinRatings, but also for the green bond markets in Vietnam. That is in March 2024. Gia Lai Electric City Company became the first listed company in Vietnam to have its green bond framework certified under the climate bond standards. It was particularly significant as it marked Vietnam's entry into internationally certified green bonds for renewable energies. I have to say that before that we also have several green bonds that will be in foreign currency, and there haven't been any domestic activities. Unfortunately, we haven't seen the climate bonds from Gia Lai Electric Company yet, but it's not the end of what we were working during the year. And I'll start with the next one, that will be the second case, and particularly exciting. So in October 2024, IDI International Development Investment Corporations achieved something unprecedented. They issued 1 trillion dongs, which is roughly 40 million USD in green bonds, and becoming the first non-financial enterprise to issue local currency green bonds. And it also didn't stop there, and the transaction also won the prestigious Green Bonds of the Year Corporates of Apex Award at the Environmental Finance Sustainable Debt Award 2025. And what's remarkable is that this wasn't just a first for Vietnam, but it was a groundbreaking for Asia's entire aquaculture sector. I have to say that it's the first one in Asia, also the second in the world in the sustainable aquacultures. And this case also demonstrates how Vietnam companies are not just following international standards, but actually leading innovations in sustainable finance within their industries. Next one, we can discuss the water infrastructures, a critical sector for sustainable development. And just 1 month after the IDIs, Hoa Binh Xuân Mai Clean Water Company, a subsidiary of Aqua One, issues 875 billion Vietnam dong in green bonds with a 20 years tenure. That is significant, and that's probably records to become the non-financial issuer with the longest bond maturities in Vietnam's capital markets in over decades. And also they won some awards as well. That is the Water Deals of the Year, Apex Award at the IJ Global Awards 2024. The significant things here is that this was the Vietnam's first green bonds in the clean water sectors, opening entirely new avenues for infrastructure financings. And the 20 years maturities also showed investor confidence in the long-term sustainable projects. And it just not end there. Building on the successful case of the Hoa Binh Xuân Mai project, Aqua continued with another component in April, which is last month. Xuân Mai Hà Nội Clean Water Transmissions Limited Companies issues 317.2 billion Vietnam dong in green bonds, also with 20 years tenures. And the issuance demonstrates the scalabilities of the green financings for infrastructure projects. And by breaking down large water system projects into components, Aqua has shown how companies can access green bond markets multiple times for different phases of their developments, which is normally people would mistaken that a green bond needs to get the whole things with the green frameworks and then just issue one bond, which is not true. But with this one, we now have a good case study to show to others issuers. And our final case on this one is regarding the post-issuance verifications. So BIDV was the first banks in Vietnam to issue green bonds in 2023. And what happened in October 2024 was equally important that we, Finratings, conducted the first post-issuance verification by domestic organizations in Vietnam. And these verifications confirmed that BIDV's allocation process and governance framework were aligned with their green bond framework. And this is crucial because it's not enough to issue green bonds. We need to also ensure the proceeds are actually used for the green purposes. And the significance here is twofold. First, it shows Vietnam financial institutions are committed to transparency and accountabilities. And second, it demonstrates that Vietnam now has domestic capacity for the full life cycle of green bond services, from issuance to post-issuance verifications. And I believe that with our other transactions, we'll be doing post-issuance verification as well to boost the investor confidence. And that is something assuring for the domestic markets. Anyway, so these 5 cases illustrate several key points for Vietnam's sustainable finance journeys. First, we have some market leaderships from the first climate bond standards to the transaction in aquaculture, in water infrastructures, and we hope to see more in paper recyclings, plastic recyclings, more and more. Second is that Vietnamese issuers are achieving international recognitions, because you can see that all several issuance that we had was awarded at the prestigious global platforms. And third, we are building a complete ecosystem capabilities, from framework development to post-issuance verifications, all supported by domestic experience. This is very important, that it is not just getting the support from external, but also we are now capable to do many things with our internal force. And finally, this case shows strong investor appetite for long-term sustainable investments. So, 20 years tenors becoming like achievable for the right projects. It may not be for others, but for this one, we figured it out, and it showed the commitment of the investors. And so, thank you for your attentions, and that is the end of the case studies that we had. And I leave the floor to Mr. Bertrand to deliver our closing remarks. Mr. Bertrand.
Thank you so much, Tung Anh and Vanessa, for this very impactful, very snappy presentation. And let me conclude this event with a few notes that reflect, on all the conversations we've been having in the past intense 2 hours and a half. So first, we all agree that there is this untapped potential in Vietnam, with Mr. Thuan Nhu sharing that less than 1% of the VND bonds outstanding today are sustainable instruments. Again, comparing to 10 to 12% globally, so demonstrating that there is potential for growth. We have extensively discussed the fact that regulation is key. And regulation is complex. Mr. To was explaining that the development of the taxonomy has taken much longer than initially planned. He mentioned up to 2 years, because there were just many variables, many stakeholders to collate together to ensure that the regulator will come up with a meaningful document. And this document is important because, as Mr. Tung made a few interesting comments, like reiterating the importance of transparency to fund providers, and this is where regulation has an important role to play. while being mindful of the domestic context, the local context, which matters most. Vietnam, if it wants to re-unlock its sustainable finance potential, has to favor cross-border issuances as well. And to do that, alignment, partial at least alignment with existing frameworks, interoperability, including with the ASEAN taxonomy, could be interesting avenues to explore. Mr. Tung was stressing the importance of global consistency at a time where especially supply chains are getting increasingly integrated, mentioning the CBAM of Europe, which is this carbon pricing mechanism at the European Union's border. We all agree that all market participants have an important role to play to raise very high the sustainability flag. Tung Anh was stressing the importance of education to market participants, of capacity building to increase the technicity of intermediaries, of investors, of fund seekers, because at the end of the day, sustainability, it starts with a concept, but then it ends with very technical matters. And this is where these kind of events are a great opportunity just to put so many people around the same virtual table to exchange ideas and to have robust conversations on sustainability. And Mr. Kong made this interesting point, which tends to be overlooked, that decision makers need to listen to the voice of customers and place them at the center of the country's sustainability story, because sustainability is through them, by them, and for them eventually. For instance, through developing, green consumption. And Mr. Zri was making the very relevant point that cooperation between the public and the private sector is paramount. And this is why we were very happy today to have a conversation mixing some representatives from the private sector and from the public sector. A few last words. There is this consensus that sustainable finance must be inclusive, especially Mr. To made the point that it's critical to extend sustainable finance to as many sectors as possible, not necessarily the most exposed ones to sustainability considerations. It has to be a joint effort. And in addition, beyond carbon, there are highly relevant topics for the country, including circular economy and waste. To achieve this inclusivity of sustainable finance, Mr. Zhang noted that policy incentives are very, very important just to help market participants in their sustainability funding. And those will be all the more successful, as Mr. Zri noted, if they have a credible sustainability strategy and if they report their sustainability undertakings in a transparent and rigorous manner. So those are, in my views, the takeaways, from those great conversations we've been having in the past two hours and a half. So great potential for the country ahead. The release of the taxonomy could be a catalyst, as it will adding transparency and credibility to sustainable instruments, and all market participants, intermediaries, investors, issuers, sustainability intelligence providers and specialists like FinRatings have a key role to play in working together to make the sustainable finance story a great one in Vietnam. Thank you very much. I will hand over the mic to Mr. Tuan then.
Thank you, Bertrand. And the organizer, FinRatings, I would like to say thank you again for joining us from Singapore, and Vanessa from Hong Kong, right? And thanks all the speaker panelists, especially joining us online, Mr. Khang, probably from Ho Chi Minh City, and Mr. Duy as well. And special thanks to Professor To and Mr. Dung for the time today. Quite long for you sitting here, and but we believe your sharing is very useful for the audience. And for FinRatings, we committed going beyond the credit rating services. We wish to make the contribution for the capital market development of Vietnam. And sustainable capital is a very important flow in many decades to come. So thanks everyone again. Thanks to the audience for the time staying with us for this morning from Hanoi. Thanks everyone, and thanks the organizing team. You did a fantastic job. Thanks again everyone, and hope to see you in the future event with FinRatings. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for your active participation in the Vietnam Sustainable Finance Webinar 2025 today. We will send the webinar materials and recording to your registered email in the following days. In the meantime, please take a moment to complete a brief review form. Your feedback is invaluable in helping us enhance future sessions. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.